On now on the Launchpad, presented by Deloitte, unlocking the potential of Sask soils. Please welcome Kellen Huber, soil fertility consultant and president of Caltech Ag Limited, and Kelly Degelman, agriculture technology specialist.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Kellen Huber. I'm the founder of Caltech Ag, and we are a soil fertility company. There's another colleague of mine that's coming up here in a little bit, Kelly Degelman. He's just been busy at the booth here today, so he couldn't quite get away, so kind of flying solo for a little bit. So one of the things that I want to thank the Canadian Western Farm Show for having me. It was a great opportunity to come up here and talk about soils and the regenerative market and understanding how to unlock the potential in today's soils. So bear with me here. I'm trying to put a 5-day course into about an hour, so we're going to kind of hit the highlights here a little bit. But you're more than welcome to come down to our booth in Hall 12 and booth 508. So we can discuss a lot of things there. So I've been involved with the farm show now for about 20 some years and brought a lot of innovations to the show over time. Everything from planters to tillage equipment to specialty products. So just wanted to kind of touch base with that a little bit. So what our program here is, the object of agriculture, what we're trying to do is provide an abundant supply of safe, affordable, nutrient food. So our mission here is to enhance soil health, optimize nutrients, reduce soil compaction, and be one of the leaders in the industry. So our goal is to maximize profitability. So a lot of our soils today aren't doing as well as we were hoping to. You know, we got lots of situations that are happening, everything from organic loss to environmental conditions, moisture problems, a lot of different things that are happening in our soils here today. So we've seen this situation lots where we see a lot of good yields go poor in 3 years and can't understand why. So over the years, I've worked with a lot of different crews, and we've created a lot of good books to take and understand, because not everybody wants to take and listen to a speaker. They want to be able to take and read a bunch of information. So these are some of just the bare minimum of 5 different products that a lot of people like to see, and it gives us an understanding of where today's soils are and how we can actually do some corrective measures. So one of the guys I get to work with a lot is Dr. Chris Underwood. He's out of Miami, Florida, and he's a chemist. And he's built some of the most amazing fertilizers in the industry. But we've based it off soil testing and a lot of different soil structures. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of where we're at on everything. So I joined up with the Neil Kinsey program, which is out of Charleston, Missouri. And in that program, there's 64 consultants like me that work in 14 different countries. So we can take and find out a lot of problems of what's going on in the industry. So this is Neil himself, and this is one of the books that he's wrote. And you can see a bunch of us down in the bottom down there. We were actually in Napa Valley in a vineyard. And this was in 2020. And in 2017, there was a wildfire that went right through Napa Valley, cleaned up all the vineyards. His was the only one that was still running. You know, they were back producing fruit within 2 years. So this is the dynamic crew. So this crew is actually at the Hefty Days, and this is some of the key guys that we work with and talk about soils around the world. So one of the guys is, 2 of the main guys is the guy in the red in the bottom, that's Al Perry, and the guy over at the immediate right is Neil Kinsey and Bo Shershop. They're all great consultants out of California, Maine, and actually the guy in the white sitting in the center is Tim Reinbold. He runs the Sanborn Fields, which is the oldest testing facility in the state of Missouri in the world that actually talks about soil fertility and soil health. So we thank Tim for a lot of those things. One of my other mentors is Dr. Don Huber. He's out of Purdue University. He got his pathology degree in 1971, and I've been lucky enough to work with him over the last 5 years. He's been up here to Saskatchewan to really look into our soils and understanding what's going on. So, and then of course, a medical doctor by the name of Dr. Arden B. Anderson. He's also wrote a lot of good books understanding the energy in soils. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of the depth and knowledge that we have in our industry. So this is one of the things that's the most dangerous phrases in agriculture, but this is the way we've been doing it. We get in our comfort zones and we understand that a lot of the things that we've done, we're safe. We know the devil that's in the process. But what we're trying to do in our business is help you think and learn and understand the different things that are happening in today's soils. So we try and grow your program, and immediately everybody, over the last day and a half, we've had a lot of people come to our booth and ask why this, why that, tried this, tried that. We look at it from a document side of things, so we'll kind of run through that. And then here's the different things that are going on in agriculture today. We got conventional, and these are all the things that are required to do them. We kind of sit a lot in the regenerative farming practices that we can take and actually do both organic and conventional and create some of the ultimate yields. We got some amazing amount of growth that's happening in ROI in the industry. So what's the most limiting things here right now? Well, low input agriculture is NPKs, and that's a lot of the things that are being done right now. Alkalinic soils, acid soils. One of the most things that are lost is boron. Wet soils is always NPK, and dry soils, it's mostly everything. So we try and help guys understand what is the limiting factors of what's going on in today's soils. So improper nutrition, lost revenues, wasted resources, plant disease. A lot of these things are what's hurting us right now, and it's taking away our potential for creating great yields. So, concept to improve the nutrition. There we go. So tools to manage the ecology, better crop rotations, using some crops, using fertility programs, and a lot of different tillage practices, because we're trying to understand how to create more microbiome in the soil. So plant spacing is one thing, timing, everything else. So when you look at your genetic potentials of the varieties that are going on this year, there's a lot of new things that are coming out and a lot of nutrition programs that are helping, and that ends in harvest. Creating more potential, less stress, better yields. So the easiest way to take and lower your cost of productions is understanding that we got to increase your yields. That is the fastest way to take and make your farm more productive, even in low commodity prices. You got to take and be able to get the yield. And understanding the nutritional balance in that is the biggest part of it, because we've been so prone to NPKs plus pH. There's a whole lot more things that need to be looked at. So one of the guys that we studied with over time, he worked in the University of Missouri State University from 1932 to 1976. Was Dr. William Albrecht. He is the guy that designed base saturations in soils. It's figuring out how big that bucket is and how much nutrient can be held at that point in time. So he always encouraged us to provide growth in the best crops for our livestock. He also taught us to look at nature, not at books. Books will help us supply information on what's going on, but actually looking at the plant. Why has that leaf got a rust spot on it? A lot of different ways to understand what's happening in your plant. So, because the soil is alive. It serves as a stomach, as everybody else that's having their lunch here right now. You just can't take and push that into your blood system. You got to have microbiology, proteins, enzymes to break all that stuff down to get it into our bloodstream. So that's why we have to take and treat our soil as needed. So, it's not about how much we put on. It's about how much actually converts and goes back into the plant. That's the key thing to all this. We got to understand that other products that come out have other residual problems, that come along with it. So for every action, there's a reaction. This is the biggest challenge that everybody has nowadays, is we want to create yield, quality, and maturity, but we only get two. Which one are we going to choose? Every accountant's going to tell you want maturity and quality because that's going to give you the best value. We've got into a lot of discussions where we've had 70 bushel growth and we've had 55 bushel growth. If 55 bushel growth is number one and the 70 bushel is feed, what's the bigger winner there? The 55. So a lot of discussion has gone around over the years about the 4 R's of nutrients. I'm going to show you the fifth one. The fifth one is actually talking about humic acid, fulvic acid, and how that really plays in unlocking the potential of our soils. The nutrients that are in our soil actually is bonded, tied up, and you need something to extract that, break that down, because we do have a lot of nutrients in our soil, but it's like, you can't take crude oil and put it into your vehicle. It has to be refined, broke down through microbiology, and microbiology is the key to all this. So I always promote and help guys better understand humic acids, because what that does is really buffers the soils, stimulates the plants, also attracts more moisture. Okay, it actually creates a oxidization period, or an oxygen zone where you can actually create more nutrients. And then the key one is fulvic. That is the spark plug that actually drives things into the soil. You can use that in so many things. It's like the spark plug of the industry. You can have all the gas you want, but if you ain't got something to spark it, fulvic acid is one of those products. Here's a slide that come out of the University of Montana. They talk about what is needed. So when we're talking about the 4 R's of nutrients, not all the time is it best to put all your nutrients up front. Okay, there's a lot of waste, a lot of things that actually goes away from. So this kind of gives you an idea. This particular field is peas. And in this particular situation, you're going to find the blue line and the purple line is actually your N and P. But your K is actually one of the most important things in most plants is your potassium availability into your soils. The second thing I want to point out is how much nutrients actually takes. And when it comes to peas, you see that calcium is 105 pounds. To grow a 50 bushel crop of peas, you need 105 pounds of calcium to come out of your soil. And I'm going to talk about how that affects all nutrient availability. Here's lentils, a little different pattern. But you can actually see how much actually goes into the grain and how much actually goes into the stover. And to get a good lentil crop, you need to maximize your potassium. They are key factors. So you're going to hear me talk about a lot of different nutrients because there's 14 essential nutrients and 3 gases that probably nobody's ever told you about that need to grow every plant. So potassium being the key to soil health. That is one of the factors that potassium actually does. It is the blood to the body. If you don't have enough potassium into your soil, your potassium can't move the other nutrients. We find a lot of problems when stalks go down, plants go down, green break. Everybody figures it's from high nitrogen. Actually, it's the lack of potassium. So potassium, boron, and copper. So again, we're going to go back to spring wheat. And one of the things I want you to see here is the difference between the grain and the stover of actually how much nutrient it takes up, because the stover is actually 50% of that nutrient comes out of the back of the combine that we don't do anything with. We need microbiology, we need a lot of things to take and break that down. That's the fastest way to start to build soil acid nutrients. Those are non-leachable, stick around. Those are what's great because the microbiology actually will take that nutrient up faster than any synthetic fertilizer that's out there. So kind of a key factor here in wheat, again, you're seeing a lot of nitrogen, a lot of phosphate, but you also see, again, potassium being at the high times, and you want that right before you get to the reproductive side of things. So all these nutrients that are coming out of the back of the combine, that's 50% of your money that you sent in spring that's going out the back that you're not recapturing. So understanding how microbiology can actually build you soil-borne acid nutrients. And this is the big one, canola. Everybody takes and looks at the amount of nutrients, but you think 137 pounds of nitrogen is key factor on this. Actually, you look at the potassium, look at the calcium. Those are the 2 biggest factors to growing 102 bushel canola. We've done that on 64 acres on trials and different things. But understanding calcium is king. Now, for a few of the guys that actually are in Saskatchewan that are growing corn, I talk about this on the radio talk show called Ag PhD. The most limiting factor in corn yields, whether it be silage, whether it be grain corn, is potassium. Those are the major factors that actually aren't being used as much in today's society, along with micronutrients. So barleys and flax, and again, a lot of the nutrients that are coming out of the back of the combine isn't being able to use. So we got to take and figure out how to create microbiology that stuff creates. decomposition of organic matter. So I'm moving along fairly fast here, but we're going to talk about basic structures in soils because that is the be-all to end-all. All this great big equipment all has to be paid off the yield that's coming off our soils. So we have to take and understand our soil structure. So you've got to look at the chemistry, the physical aspects, and the biological side because that is the key, very much the key. And this is a typical picture of a soil structure. You can actually see the different sand, silt, and clays. You can see how they formulate and they create platelets in the soil. And if it's unbalanced and you get too much clay into the soil, you create compaction. And again, that's magnesium and sodium. So we'll kind of walk through that in here in the next little bit. But you got to create the particles and you got to be able to create the glue, and that's called humin. Okay, and you find that a lot in humic acid and fulvic acid, and those humins create the glue. And that actually stops erosion. That actually slows down those small particles that you get on the top of the soil that actually blow away. So the importance, decomposition of organic matter, formulation of humus in soils, because that's the glue that's going to hold everything together. And definitely looking at nitrogen fixation. So these are the little, I try and put lots of pictures in so guys get an idea what's kind of going on in our soil hardness and our soil structure program. So we get granules, which is kind of the first situation that happens in soils. You'll see that a lot in sodium soils and salted soils. You'll see a lot more granular type. And then as it gets worse, it starts to get blocky, or you'll start to see different chunks starting to come out into play. And then all of a sudden you'll get into the platelet side of things, and that's where your serious compaction comes into play. So that's what an ideal soil looks like. We want 45 to 50% minerals. We want 25% air, 25% water, and 5% organic matter. That is the key factor. This works around the world. This just isn't a Western Canada thing. As I said, we got the data that actually works in 14 different countries. This is what's going on here, okay? Most of the time, guys don't quantify what's going on in our compacted soils. Where we actually take and push so much of the minerals up, we take and reduce the water, reduce the air, and we reduce the organic matter. And a lot of the organic matter actually, when it's done on a soil test, actually isn't giving you the best result possible. And I'll go into that in a little bit. So again, calcium is king. There's for certain percentages that calcium has to be in your soil. Most of your disease problems, most of your sugar problems, diseases, everything starts here, okay? And we're going to kind of go through that in a short little period. I just wanted to show you a quick little item on lentils here. This was a little calcium program that we did this fall. Even though it was 40-some degrees here when we kind of did this, the left-hand side is showing a 30, we did a phosphate program, so everybody said we didn't need that much phosphate, so when we put 31 pounds on the left side, and on the right side, we put 51 pounds. But on the left side, that was our check, and we had 24 bushel canola. We did a calcium program with some amino acids on there and some other products. Cost us about $32. Those are small green lentils, and they sold for $34 a bushel. That was a 3 bushel increase. So at the end of the day, he come out with just shy of $60 return on understanding how calcium plays into the fact. We've also had situations where we applied calcium and potassium, and we've seen as high as 12 bushel increase on small green lentils. So there's a lot of things that you can do once you understand the soils. This is the key factor. The wheels on the bus, what drives them? Phosphate, potassium. When we get good availability of those nutrients, those are what drives the bus. Nitrogen is a key factor in there, and you can see the different nutrients that are above that are synergistic to those nutrients. These are all key things, and without micronutrients to take and move some of these products, that's why we have the breakdown in the nutrients that we have. Our losses become too great because these other things are tying it up. So the roots are the root of the problem. Again, the laws of minimum and the laws, and we're going to talk about maximum, and it's always the leaky bucket, which is the unit that's going to create us the most problem because We've looked at different programs and did an understanding of our soils and did an understanding of we can base off micronutrients, base off yields, and understand what is the limiting factor. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to have Kelly come up here and talk about our technologies. So again, nutrient levels are basic structure of today's soils. So, but then there's the situation of what about the law of maximums? What does that issue cause us? Okay? So then we sit there, and here's the synergistic things. When you have too much nitrogen, you're impeding potassium and calcium uptake. Potassium, if you don't have enough potassium, you can't get good nutrient as such as nitrogen. And what's the most used product in the industry? Nitrogen. So these are the basic functions of things that actually are hurting us because we have too much or too little of. And this is a situation where you have excessive elements. So you can kind of go through the list and we can talk about more, but those are the basics. But the killer is magnesium. That one robs us of so many factors, that and sodium. Sodium, if you look down underneath molybdenum there, again, it's affecting the key things, potassium and phosphate. This is a chart that should shock a few people, and we've done extensive studies across North America, Australia, South Africa. This kind of scares people because a lot of people don't look at these type of numbers to see how much nitrogen they're actually putting down. This is your losses. So every time you get over, and most of our soils here in Saskatchewan are somewhere between 18 and 23%. So you're looking at, for every pound of nitrogen you want to go into that plant, you have to put on 1.5 to 1 3/4 pounds just to get that in there. This is the first place to better understand how excessive nutrients create other issues. Here's another thing about pH. And when you're at a 7 pH, you're getting 100% uptake of most nutrients. And as we get to acidic soils, nutrients starts to break down because it's tied up by other things. This also works just about identically going on the other side. Once you start getting over 7.5, 7.7, 8, 8.1, you start to lose just as much. The only thing that doesn't change as much is your potassium cycle. Okay, when the higher pH goes up, your potassium cycle still stays available, but the other things start to decrease. So the other thing that's happening too is the salt affected in our soils. A lot of the stresses that are going on in today's soils right now, last year was a prime example. When the heat comes on and we're lacking potassium in our soil, salt actually takes over. Salt makes the stalk brittle. Okay, that's a lack of potassium and a lack of copper, and that's why the stalk taken actually falls over. So managing and understanding salt and sodium is a key factor to our microbial activity, which is, again, we talked about all that organic matter that comes out of the back of the combine, over 50% of it that we never use. So all this is trying to figure out what is the best possible yields and quality, and getting proper structure is the key factor. Everybody's might have seen this. Where is the most aerobic zone in your soil? Well, it's in the top 2 inches, because that's what we till, that's what we move, that's what we do with. But things start to break down after that. Once we get down into the 5-inch, 10-inch zone, we become the B horizon, which actually does not have as much aerobic zone in there. So we got a lot of roots that are dropping down, and they're water seekers is what they're trying to do. If you actually look at the root, most of the aerobic zone is where the microbiology converts the nutrients, and that's where you'll see the most hyphae, the most root hairs, all done in the top 2 inches. Just another picture in the different evaluations of the horizons that are in the soil structure. This is a chart that actually kind of slows a lot of people down in the world. They've never seen this. So what does this really mean? So in a healthy soil, in a clay soil, and that's what we are, this is the reasons why you use soil sample at 6 2/3 of an inch. Because this is 2 million pounds of product. When a soil test is said to you that they're talking parts per million, this is what they're referring to. Why? Because there's 2 million pounds, and that's where the parts of millions come into play. Clay soils, we're supposed to have in phosphate capability generally across the board, we're supposed to have close to 10,000 pounds of usable phosphate. There's a lot of people that talk about that. We have all kinds of residuals, all kinds of nutrients in our soil that is not tapped. We actually physically measure these on a daily yearly basis and figure out what our soil types are and how much of these nutrients are in there. Silicon is one of the big ones, calcium, magnesium, and we're going to show. Now this is soils just outside here at Grand Coulee. These are soils that we took and tested. We started testing these about 2020 is when we started testing some of these. So if you remember from the previous slide, we're supposed to have 10,000 pounds of phosphate in our soil. In this particular situation right here at Grand Coulee, we're only sitting at about 1,534 pounds of raw nutrient. Raw nutrient. Okay? That's all the soil that we have capability of. We actually have an XRF scanner that's at our booth that we're displaying here today that'll actually show you all the nutrient contents in its raw form. So now, between Kelly and I, we're figuring out a conversion rate of how to understand what does that mean for today's crops, how can we make that available. So, and of course you're seeing a lot of potassium that's in our soil. Now here's the same soil test that we studied also, made by another company. This one here showing 494, and again, these are all in the Grand Coulee area, it's not very far away from here. So everything that we do, we back up by science and understanding and testing. Here's one of the dangerous charts that are in the agriculture world. Here's what you understand, Mulder's chart. Everything we do, every reaction has a reaction. And one of the biggest factors that we have is, remember I said calcium is king? Well, you see the lines up on top there, and that's what actually, calcium controls all the nutrients going into your soil. Controls all your disease cycle, your pesticide cycles, everything that's going on. If we become better stewards of the land, we can actually grow bigger crops on less dollars. So one of the biggest things that you see on there is phosphate and magnesium. Everybody's been on a phosphate build program for a lot of years. We've put down extra phosphate, but if our magnesium levels are too high, we can't take and build. And I'm going to talk to you about the ionic and the cation soil nutrients and how their electrical charges are. This just kind of gives you the idea of what, again, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and then the other nutrients that all have a basis in today's agriculture. This is a chart. There's 17 essential nutrients that have to grow every crop every year. We look at what, 4, maybe 5 throughout the year? So on the right-hand side, you're going to see the chemical properties that are off the periodic timetable. And in there, you're going to see a plus and negative sign, whether they're positive energy, because our soil is negative. And trying to introduce negative units into the soil have to have a medium in the soil which attached to, and I'll talk to you about that in a couple minutes. But the positives actually collect on that clay colloid. This is what an actual clay colloid looks like. It is a single cell clay colloid that has positive cations. This is what's called CEC. This is what you base all your pHs off of, the amount of product that is in there. Okay? Here's all the negative energy charges that we put on our soils every day that got to find a spot in our soil medium so that the microbiology can convert it and get it up into the plant. The number one being NO3, nitrogen nitrate. That's what actually has to convert into amino acids so that the plant can take it up. The second one is the energy. That's the phosphate, and that's a triple negative, so it doesn't take much to knock that off. It's clay colloid. Again, these are what makes up pH. So potassium, sodium, hydrogen, calcium, and calcium and magnesium are double plus charges, so they're the bullies in the sandboxes. They'll kick a lot of things out in a heartbeat. So in one of the most important thing on a soil sample is figuring out the base saturation of your soils. You can do parts per million, those are good, but base saturation is telling you how big that bucket is. Are we dealing with a 1 gallon bucket, which could be sand, okay? Dealing with a 3 gallon bucket, which could be silt, or are we dealing with a 5 gallon bucket, which is clay? These are the percentages that have to be evaluated when you're dealing with different textures of soils. And again, we look at all types of different situations throughout 14 different countries. So the most important thing, as I said earlier, is your base saturation calculations, but everything that we sat back earlier and talked about was about pounds, okay? So this is a test that we use out of the United States. That was a canola durum field, and it's actually here outside Moose Jaw. And these are what the soil structures look like. And we can convert, so how you convert pounds into ppm is divide by 2. So 200 pounds of potassium sulfate, you would actually raise your soil by 100 ppm. So this is what fertility can do. If you get the right climates and you get everything, you get the right processes, you can grow the biggest watermelons you ever want. But you can also grab, all kinds of water plants and different things, because it's climate moisture is what determines the energy of the plant. So this is a regular soil sample that we do, and I want to talk to you about the organic matter. That's here, because you see that where it says OM. Usually I have a pointer and I can walk you through some of this, but the direct relationship to the organic matter, and if you see where all those red marks are, where the yellow is, there's going to be a spot there that says TOC. That's total organic carbon. Carbon is one of those discussions that we sell it as a credit. What I want to talk to you about is all those negative ions that are in the soil. Carbon is key. That's what sticks to them. That's what holds them into the soil. Because any negative ion that's in the soil either has to be attached to a hydrogen, a carbon, or an oxygen molecule. So if you see that, we look at 4.1 is what the organic matter is. Actually, when we look down there, 2.4. The basic minimum of soil structure to get any microbiology stayed in our soil has to be above 2. That is the threshold. So you look at some of those and you actually see they get down into the ones fairly quick. We got one that shows 3.3 and it's at 1.2. Our microbiology life really slows down very fast and it becomes dormant. So as we come back into the different soil structures and everything that's going on in our soils, this is the basic parameter. And most soil tests always have these. They have ranges between 60, 70, different areas. In our soils here today, what ideal soils look like is 68% calcium, 11% magnesium, 7% potassium, 7% hydrogen, 0.5% sodium, and 3% of the other cations, and that's the makeup of your micronutrients. Most soil tests do not show the other cations in the soil, which is micronutrients. So that is the ideal situation that we're looking for, and that's what we strive. And that's everything that's over a 19 CEC soil. So moving forward, again, we're jumping. This is a 5-day course that I put on, and I'm trying to do it in an hour, so we're scooting through things pretty quick. You can come back to our booth over in Hall 12 and have a discussion with us. But this is a soil health test, and it actually breaks down the nutrients that are in the soil profile, the Haney test. So this establishes the difference between synthetic fertilizers and organic-based nutrients, both in the two popular nitrogen phosphorus zones. And as you can see on here, the amount of nitrogen that's in that soil shows up at 10.4 pounds of nitrogen nitrate and then the H2O extraction. So there's 29.6 pounds, but actually in that inorganic, there's 10.4 pounds. So that's the synthetic. In this particular situation, there's 14.3 pounds of nitrogen. That is based off of organic matter and other microbiome that's in the soil. That's what's actually holding that together. So when you talk about organics, you talk about regen farming, this is where the nutrients really comes to play. The other thing that looks down is you see the different fertilities that are in there, and that actually tells you more about the organic nutrients that are in the soil. But when you go over to the health test, you see down there where it says the H2 water extractions, we actually show a soil health chart. This particular field shows 25.18. That is a pretty good chart because most of the soils that you take in the Midwest, they start in the single digits, 2s and 4s and 6s. We get down into Montana, get into South Dakota, get into Kansas, you'll see a lot of those 6s, 7s, and 8s. This is a program that we've been working with a client in yellowgrass, and we've actually created more carbon because his carbon respiration is over 300. Most of those don't even hit triple digits. They're sitting in the double digits. Carbon is key to every negative ion nutrient that's put in the soil. That's what buffers, that's what makes nitrogen more available. And actually it shows there a nitrogen conversion, carbon to nitrogen, 17.42. So that is actually quite good. So we're taking, and we see a lot of those that'll be in 7, 6 areas. So we're moving that along. So as I've kind of mentioned, carbon is a major factor which ties up a lot of the negative ions that are in the soil, creates soil structure, gives ability for microbiology to take and actually create more nutrients. So that test just shows how much of those nutrients are actually converting into organic matter for the microbiology and through plant nutrients. The pH test. A lot of people see this chart, can't really make what it really discusses. Some people can, some people can't. Ideal soil pH is 6.5. That is the ideal scenario. As we get off to the right and we start crawling up at 7, 7.5, 7.2, most of our soils in the Regina area sit somewhere between 7.6 and 8.3. Look at what happens to our nutrient. What happens to our nitrogen? What happens to our phosphate, calcium? All become binded up. I just threw this in for a little bit to understand when you're in low pH soils, these are some of the different nutrients, and there's reasons why guys take and bring nutrient cycling down to different pHs so that they can grow different crops, but these are just some ideal crops. Everybody, pH, now you look at the top of this line, that's 6.8 pH. There's 3 different types of 6.8s. Anybody guess which one is the right 6.8? The one on the left. When your calcium is at 68, your magnesium is at 12, and your potassium is at 5. But that's still because pH is the power of hydrogen, and it's a mathematical calculation. So you can't control everything that's going on in your soils just by pH, because the components of that actually can skew the amount of nutrients you're trying to get that plant to uptake. So soil test, soil test, soil test. You can't manage if you don't measure it. And we found over the last day and a half, there's a lot of people in Saskatchewan that do not soil test. They can't see the value in it. If you can't manage it, you can't understand it. So this is soils just outside in the Pence area. We talk about stratification. We're introducing a soil compaction tester at our booth, and this is a stratification of soils. There's actually, if I had a laser pointer, there's 4 different platelets on there, because I talked about soil structure at the beginning, how the different, where it goes from granular to blocky, and then it'll go into platelets. This is the extreme part of compaction because it's already in the platelet form. There's a canola. You see the different root structures that goes through earlier, but we actually folded that over. It just take and plopped right out. So there's where the root growth stops. That's where your water stops also. So this is actually a probe of what our compaction tester shows, and this was done at Moose Jaw. So what happens is this probe goes down 24 inches, and it actually has it has a load cell on there that measures every inch. Okay? So as that soil compaction tester goes down, it's measuring the amount of pressure it's taking down. Well, you can see that the water holding capacity in the root zone on this particular field is only sitting at about 6.5 inches, because once it hits that yellow line, the roots start to change. So if you're going to do any type of tillage, I would advise you to get a soil compaction tester and understand how big a bulk density you can get nutrients to go into that soil profile. This is one of the tools that I do a lot of work with. This is the Lemken Karot, because we can get it down to 8 inches. It mixes everything up and actually creates a good seed bed later on going on for maximum amount of germination. So remember I said to you early, books will give you an idea what's going on, but if you're not looking at the plants and understanding what's going on, these are the same. This is a corn leaf, but it also relates to a wheat leaf, canola leaf, any leaves that are out there. This is just what's happening in our soil, and it actually tells you way before you can get a plant tissue test or a sap test going on. So understanding where nitrogen loss is right in the center of that vein. So most of my consulting, when I'm walking and looking at plants, I'm looking at what the leaves are actually telling me. Because here's all the micronutrient deficiencies. We see so many times, we see lentils, we see peas dying out in the low-lying areas. The plants are turning yellow. Well, that is a nitrogen loss, yes, but also it could be a whole lot of manganese and magnesium that is actually creating some of those issues. So the devil's in the details. And as I said, the plants always tell the truth. Micronutrients, a lot of people ask me, when are we going to start putting micronutrients? What's the best time, best place? Well, here's a quick little chart on that. So at germination time, you want to make sure if you got adequate amount of iron, zinc, manganese, and then as the plant really starts to go into stalk stage and building biomass, again, you're having a lot of manganese because your disease cycle is starting to set in at this point in time. If you got problems, it's in this period. And that's where nutrient stratification really becomes a problem. Nutrient density becomes tied up because our heat cycle's starting to come on. Usually that yellow period where the vegetative state is, we're talking about early June in that area, late May, early June, when the soil's starting to tighten up. And we're just praying for a little bit of rain. Just a little bit of rain to get things going. But boron and iron really become major factors once it's becoming into the reproductive time. So again, the soil, the plant always tells the truth. Then we start talking about microbiology. You've heard me talk about the microbiome that's going in the soil. We need to, ideally, we'd like to take a spadeful and find 25 of these nice, beautiful earthworms rolling around in our soil. I'm very lucky if we find one. Most of the time, we don't even find them. We start going south of number one, we don't find it. In the heavy clay soils, we're not finding a whole lot of earthworms. As we go north, but hey, everything's great, right? You know, early bird gets the worm. Well, he's going to starve a little bit today. Soil biology, everybody's starting to talk. It's a little bit of the new discussion. How do we take and work at that? How do we take and build that? What is the factors that are changing in our biology? Well, there's a lot of practices that we've used over time that's actually reduced the amount of microbiology. I've had the lucky to work with some key guys out of Houston, Texas that study soils immensely. This was a study that we started back in 2020, 2021. This is the minimum levels. Our nitrogen solubilizers, carbon cyclers, potassium. He phones me up, he says, you got serious troubles up there. You better figure some stuff out. Send some stuff around, figure it out. So we started doing more testing, and in this process, we actually did about 4 different tests. We were getting a little bit of nutrient that was moving, but we came down to doing some strategic tillage. Compaction. Remember that chart that we showed earlier about the nutrient cycle? 45% minerals, 25% air, 25% water. We did a strategic tillage. We went down 8 inches with that Lemken-Karrat on that unit. We raised the hydroplane by 301%. It's all we did different in this program to create better microbiology. Strategic tillage, folks. There's a time and a place and an understanding. That's why we do the testing we do. So, again, in periodic time, trying to get things done, we're talking about this is in 1 kg per hectare, but this is 6 3/4 inches. This is how much microbiology we're supposed to have in our soils. These are the different microbiologies that actually stimulate. These are the common ones that are talking about. Most of the ones talk about hyphae, which is a fungi, which is a phosphate-based positive fungi. Algae. These are the different reasons why these things are out there, and we can go into more details if you want to come back to the booth. So what matters the most? People want to know what's going on. That's why we do the testing, so you can get a good reaction and get a good consequence. Long-term solutions. That's what we need. If we're always taking and fixing the result, we're never finishing the problem. So the effects in our soil differentiate, on soil health and fertility. So every weed that's in your field, we have a book that's called When Weeds Talk. Every weed that's in your field is a nutrient deficiency that is already present in your soil. Kochia, Too much salt, not enough calcium. Wild oats, too much sodium, not enough calcium. A lot of other nutrients, and we can talk about that. Same with microbiology, same with diseases. We've actually hurt too much of our microbiome, and we can't take and get over top of it. Yes, the pathogen sits on the soil, but we need other nutrients to take and break things down. So again, good microbiology, good soil creates better living growth. This is one that kind of stops people in their tracks. They're trying to figure out how to take and create Brix levels, energy factors, how we can deal with aphids. I showed guys in the Grand Coulee Pence area here, when we take and actually add a carbon source and a sugar source, we actually reduce the aphids in one shot. In one shot we did that. So when you get a Brix tester, which is $120, and you actually take the sap out of the plant and squeeze it through, it'll give you an immediate Brix test, and it'll also give you a calcium test. Because when that line is very extruded, very blunt, you know that you got poor calcium. If it's fuzzy, you got calcium. But these are standard Brix tests that you can do on any plant and get a total understanding of what's going on, and this will give you more energy and less disease. So a lot of farmers say, we don't have time for all this. We're too busy doing other things. We'll leave it to somebody else. Well, I encourage most farmers to educate themselves so that they can make better decisions on their farm. Poor old chicken's having a rough day, but hey, we're making it, So anything worth doing is worth doing right. So easy and quick usually creates a lot of dollars and lost revenues if it's quick and easy. So building soil organomatter, that is a key factor to the primary food of microbiology, and creates better soil structures. So it improves physical health, water, tilth, and plant nutrition. So now we're going to start talking a little bit, and in a second here I'm going to introduce Kelly Diggleman. He is our agriculture technologist that works with me. So one of the main functions and takeaway for today, this is what makes yield. These are the 4 nutrients that you should rely on to making the most amount of yield out of your crops. Good phosphate levels, good potassium levels, good zinc and boron. And everybody says you can't deal with your micros till you deal with your macros. Well, did they happen to know that zinc is what controls phosphate availability in your plants? Do people tell you that boron is what actually controls potassium in your plants? Those are the key factors of why micros are so important. So the other take-home message, to make sure that everything else stays maintained, you got to maintain good calcium levels in your soil at all time, and that is in the base saturation. The ideal spot is 65 to 68% base saturation of your calcium. So sulfur levels, everybody figures if you're at 20 parts per million of sulfate in your plant tissue test, or I shouldn't say tissue test, soil samples, you actually should be closer. 50 is the low side of acceptable. 120 is actually right in the average of where we should be for our sulfate levels, because it is going to make all the other nutrients come available. When I take and put elemental sulfur into the soil profiles, and I use, because there's a difference in 2 sulfurs, sulfate and elemental sulfur. Sulfate has to use to convert nutrients into amino acids, which is taken up by the plants. Sulfuric acid is what breaks down the other pathogens and the other diseases and helps break down all the other minerals that are tying things up. The main controller of all the soil is calcium and sulfur, and the only thing that controls calcium is sulfur. Those are the only 2 major factors. To get energy in your plant, you have to have potassium. As every human that walks around here, we have to have sufficient amount of blood in our body to move all the nutrients from our stomach to our muscles. That is what potassium does to the plants. It moves the nutrients. Calcium makes it all available, potassium moves it. What's the energy factor in the plant? Phosphate. Phosphate is one of the key energy factors that creates all other nutrients and creates optimal yield. So again, if you have too much magnesium, you can't get good phosphate uptakes. Organic matter is the key to the structure of the soil. Those water holding capacity, nutrient availability, microbiology. So At the end of the day, folks, we're here to help you create healthy, well-balanced soils to create dense nutrient food. So there is no silver bullet in agriculture, guys. Hate to say it, there's no lotion or potion that'll fix everything for $8 and give you a $40 return. It's a science that takes time, and success, well, it's not an accident, it's work. Success is due every day, and when we rest on our laurels, that's when things kind of fall off. So we always try to move things forward. So with that being said, if you want to hear me more, you can contact on Siri on Ag PhD. I'm fairly regular on that show talking about soil sciences. That's at channel 147 on Sirius at 1 p.m. We'll talk about all kinds of different things, and I'm very glad to be working with the Ag PhD crew. They've got a tremendous amount of knowledge and information, and I do a lot of contact for them up here in Canada. And this is some of the groups. Actually, the guy on the right is Kevin Kelp. He learned how to grow 455 bushel corn on non-irrigated soils and understanding balanced soils. A lot of these groups are some of the highest yielders in all of the North America. So once again, if you guys got any questions, you can come back to ktag.ca. We got all kinds of information on there. We'll actually show you the research farm as everything's kind of coming together and give you an update, and you can contact us at any point in time. So as I mentioned, we're over in Hall 12, booth 805. Come on over there if you got any questions. We sure appreciate you guys, and we want to thank the Canadian Farm Show for having us, and thank you for listening to us. So you guys were awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Let's give Kellen a hand.